Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Sociology. I'm Dr. Gritz, and today we're going to talk about gender stratification. So, let me ask you a question. Can you imagine a society where men stay home and raise the children, and the women go out and secure an income for the family? Can you imagine that type of culture? Some of you guys are like, yeah, I dig that. You're digging it right now. But in reality, there are cultures like that. There's cultures where everything we know about what it means to be a boy or a girl is completely reversed. There's a famous anthropologist, her name was Margaret Mead, and she went about observing many tribes, and she found that in certain tribes, women were raised or socialized, like we learned in the preceding chapter. They were trained actually to be just as aggressive as men. How do you train a woman to do that? Well, they would use hunger. They would keep the babies very, very hungry. You could see, often observe, women would carry their babies, women or female babies, on top of their heads, and they would secure them sometimes on hills and make them very, very hungry, so that when they finally were fed the mother's breast, they did so vigorously, rigorously, and they weren't saying, hey, that's not okay, that's not ladylike. They would often use beatings and often to make them very tough, right? Kind of like what gang initiations do. So everything that you learned about what it is to be a boy or a girl is based on what society believed before you, right? So we are moving into what we call stratification by gender. And when we move into this chapter, we want to understand that gender, when we talk about, gender roles, what does exactly gender roles mean? It means that it's the social construction. Think about construction. We build it. Social construction. We socially built gender roles. So as you remember from our last topic on social status, gender is an ascribed status. You're just born with that status, that gender status. Now, role, remember, we learned, is the responsibilities or the application of what we're supposed to do under that status. So a doctor heals you, a mother nurtures you. What is a girl supposed to do? What is the role of a girl? What is the expectations of a boy? But I will tell you, that is socially made. So now you understand where the term comes, gender role. So, oh my God, can't talk. So now we understand where the term gender role comes from. It's the application of traditional roles to this, leads to the differentiation between men, between what we expect of women and men, what we think men are supposed to be or women are supposed to be. And if people don't adhere to those gender roles, what it means to be a boy or girl, somehow that we get that confused with sexuality. So remember, gender is who you go to bed as. I go to bed as a boy or a girl. And sexual orientation is who I go to bed with, who I'm attracted to. So basically, you were molded into what you believe as to be what's appropriate for being a boy or a girl. And who did that? Who were the agents of socialization? Remember from earlier, we talked about that. We talked about work, behavior, all of these things in terms of how we respond to one another. We were taught certain jobs are for boys or girls. Maybe someone comes knocking on your door and it's a woman and you have a plumbing issue and you go, wait, it's a woman? Hello? Or maybe you've experienced this. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your Captain Maureen. And you're like, Maureen? A female captain? Now again, we know there are female captains, or pilots actually, but we're still a little surprised. So we have the application of traditional gender roles, what we expect of women and men in terms of work, behavior, right? Women are supposed to be what? Men are supposed to be what? And we'll get to the traditional socialization process in the U.S. because, of course, it's different. And certainly, how do we react to one another, based on whether they're a male or female. In some cultures, women aren't even allowed to look at men right in the eye. So we have this social construction of what it means to be a boy or a girl. All right, so in the USA, right, how were you trained? What or who trained you? Your religion certainly trained you, right? Maybe in my religion, we never saw women in leadership roles, so that gave me a message. Maybe you watched TV. Maybe you weren't even allowed to watch TV. Maybe you were taught were the inferior race or gender. I was just watching a great show you got to watch. This has to do with social control too, but the movie, the Netflix series Unorthodox, it talks about, women have no right to study. Women stay home, they make babies, and that's how women are perpetually socialized. So if you're trained that way, you never know that there's another way, right? You never know that some women actually work. Some women don't even have children, and society accepts them. But if you grow up in an atmosphere where women are never even allowed to be educated, because how do you control someone? You keep them dumb, right? That's right. So in the U.S., girls, we were taught to be, sweet, submissive, right? I remember going to recess. Now, I'm old, right? But when I was little, I remember girls, we were taught not to get dirty, right? Boys were allowed to get, dirty, and we were taught not to get, certainly, our clothes dirty. Men, you were taught you're masculine, right? Not to be subordinate, active, aggressive, right? Daring, dominant. So again, our siblings, our educational system, everybody socialized. If your little brother or sister or older brother saw you playing with the opposite what they ascribe to the gender, they go, oh my God, right? You're playing with a dolly. Well, let me ask you a question. If you have a little boy and he takes a dolly, and this happened when I was working with play therapy with little children, but nevertheless, if you have a little boy and he takes a dolly and he looks under his clothes, that's probably the purest heterosexual thing you can do. Let's see, I'm a boy. I know what I got. I'm interested in the opposite sex. So I look under her dress, right? I'm affirming all your before. And you want to see what it is. That would be normal. But somehow if a little boy sees another boy pick up a doll, he's chastised, right? Talk about social control and conforming to the role of boy. You will be informally social controlled, right? You'll be ridiculed and laughed at. And so that you will go, oh, I don't play with dollies. And then you'll bully someone else who does play with a dolly. So it's very interesting how we're groomed, how we're agents of socialization certainly mold us, condition us into those gender roles. It's very important. And think about it. Rigid gender role socialization is basically, it leads to homophobia because you're so scared that someone's not going to ascribe to what that expectation of status is, or in this case, gender, so that the fear of being gay, homosexuality, the fear or phobia of being gay, that, they're gay. So as long as they are, ascribed to the gender role, we're okay. So think about educational institutions that women should be taking certain classes. I remember when I went to school, women were allowed cooking, men took industrial arts. I took industrial arts. I don't know. All right, so we have the socialization, but again, we're looking at this from a sociological perspective. We're not here to say it's right or wrong. We're here to understand it. And so what is the functional perspective? How does it contribute to society, the gender roles? Well, we all know what's expected. So we're not saying it's right or wrong, but think about it. It gives us structure. We know as a girl, I'm supposed to do this. As a boy, I'm supposed to do this. All jobs get done if everybody specializes in something, right? By having a difference, I don't know, it contributes to everything getting done. So that's one perspective, functionalist. Conflict would view it, no, we're not looking at how it contributes. We're looking at this is just another social institution, marriage, where inequality is illustrated. In this case, men on top of women, women under, I don't mean in the biblical sense, but you know what I mean. Men, right, in a dominant position over women. So fuming, and looking at what's not fair about whatever they're looking at. The conflict's going to look at that and see what's not okay. So in America, we have mostly egalitarian relationships. It means we share the power. I don't mean like every decision making, okay, you do this, you do that. But, women will make some decisions, men might make some decisions. But in really patriarchal, traditional, like the Amish, the woman is the weaker vessel. They believe, according to the Bible, that the man must take charge. The Promise Keepers are a recent modern form of a group or society trying to implement traditional gender roles. This was reinstated several years ago within the Black community, and many football and pro players got involved in it. And it was about men going home and taking care of their families and assuming that role. And men also having a place to talk about what it means to be a male in lust and not acting on it. It was very Christian based. But again, women supported it because they wanted someone to come back and lead in the family. They wanted to keep the family intact. The interactionist perspective will look at gender roles as our communication patterns, the symbol for male, female. They look at patterns of communication. They would say that men are taken seriously. Women are oftentimes more emotional, nagging. I often think, men return their food and, oh my God, it's cold. A woman, oh God, she's never happy, right? So we have these different perspectives of how we look at gender roles, certainly. So as we move into from the theoreticals of perspective on gender roles, the next area tackles that obviously women historically have been oppressed. As sociologists, we look at society and we want to have social change when we see problems. And so we know that women have long been oppressed. Some say, no, women vote. Well, okay, just the fact that we're saying women now vote shows that at one time they didn't. So along the political agenda, women have long been underrepresented. Yeah, they have a voice now, but they're still underrepresented. Second-class treatment in many situations. Some places and still globally, they don't have rights, not even allowed to work. Job market restrictions. A lot of times they can't own the land. They can just work for the land, right? So women joined forces, and we had the feminist movement come in. And I want you to understand that it wasn't just about women burning their bras. The feminist movement, many men came on board, and just like with racial inequality, many Caucasians came along and supported black rights and said, this is not okay, this is an injustice. And many men supported women too and said, this is not okay. But still, as we could see, many years later, we still have this gender inequality. The Me Too movement is forming now and came out of that, but for many years, women just they didn't think that anybody would believe them, right? Where else can a woman be turned into the victim or now the perpetrator of a crime that she is the victim? When a lot of times women are raped, it's their fault. So women just, I better not say anything, right? So, we call it this rape culture, et cetera, et cetera. So we said this feminist movement was born in upstate New York, yay, in 1848. It was responsible for the 19th Amendment. Women got to vote. And of course, it became much full force in the 70s. And that's where we get the depiction of many women going out and saying, wait, I can have a job and I can do this. And obviously, women did get rights. And what happened was we said, okay, women, you can work. Go ahead. And women now, are many first started in the service industry after the war or in the war, and then they started to get equal rights. But what happened was, okay, women, you can work, but when you come home, you're going to work your second shift. And that's a sociological term that women, don't get off. They have two now different, roles, different statuses. And these statuses don't always, they can provide role conflict, right? Role strains that you might have seen. So women are now allowed to work, but they're still taxi driving. They're still having to earn less money, occupational segregation, and still, again, the second shift where women certainly have to finish their work and now they have to cook and clean. And not all men are like this. My brothers aren't, they're good guys. They always pick up, mom did a good job. But in my family, we didn't have a lot of gender role, inequality. So think about how you were raised. Many men are raised not to be dependent on women. They were taught to cook and clean. And many women are still dependent on men. We look at social issues or social explanations for societal change. Now women can get divorced because of equality. Women can go out and support a family. But at one time, income affected inequality. If you don't make any money, you can't rise up. So you have no power, which continues marginalization of some groups. It's infested. It's within the infrastructure of that group. So we continue to perpetuate this inequality. So it's kind of interesting, right? It just allows you to look at your own life and what you think of as being male or female. And I implore you to go look at other cultures. It's really pretty cool to see how other cultures see the difference of male and female. Look at the fa-fa-finis. That's when you have too many boys and you need another girl gender role. So the last boy, they make him a girl. They're not gay. They're now a fa-fa-fini, you know. We talked about the Berdache Native Americans. They have both traditional gender roles, and instead of being seen as weird or, oh my God, you know, the peripherals of society, they're seen as something special. Having both spirits, beautiful, right? So go research this, look at this, and I hope you understand that gender roles are socially constructed.